Hi, boys and girls. This week we're going to start our science unit on living and non living things. And we're going to start by talking about plants. So we'll do lessons on plants and then we'll finish up the school year with a lesson on animals. So let's look at what we're going to learn in this science lesson. We are going to be learning about how to describe whether or not something is living or non-living. So the first thing I want you to do is you're going to look at some pictures with me, and we're going to tell whether or not these objects are living things or non-living things. So the first one I'm going to show you is people. Are people living or non-living things? That's right, boys and girls. People are living things. What about this guy? This is a shark. Is a shark a living or non-living thing? That's right, boys and girls. It too is a living thing. Now, here's a tricky one. Let's see how smart we are. This is a flower. Is a flower a living or non-living thing? That's right, boys and girls. If you guess that a flower is a living thing, then you are correct. A flower is a living thing. Now, let's think about some of the ways and some of the things that all of these have in common to make them living things. So, first of all living things can move. They can move. So, I'm going to write move here. I want you to think about the fact that people can move. They can walk, sit, jump, lots of different ways people can move. What about a shark? A shark swims in the ocean. Uh, so a shark has the ability to move. But what about that plant? What about that plant? The plant has roots that anchor it into the ground. But a plant moves in ways that you wouldn't think. A plant can actually adjust or change its position so that it helps itself get more or less sunlight. So you might see a plant in a shady area bent over in a way that it allows itself to get more sun. So all living things must be able to move. Now, an important thing to remember is they have to move all on their own. All on their own. They have to be able to do it by themselves. Good job. What's another way that we can tell a living or non living thing? That's right, boys and girls. If you think about just people in general, people need to eat. They need food and water to uh, live. So, living things need to take in nutrients. They need to take in nutrients. They have to have some way of feeding themselves and giving themselves water. Now, again, a person can go to the grocery store and buy food. They can actually also grow their own food. An animal, pets, domesticated pets like a dog or a cat may have to wait for you to feed it, but they are still able to hunt and find things to eat in the wild. So you may be thinking, well, how does a plant eat? Well, a plant actually makes its own food, and we're going to talk about that later in the lessons. So the second way that you can tell if something is living or non-living is a object's ability to take in nutrients, Good job. Now, what's another way that you can tell that things are living or non-living? That's the ability for something to grow or to change. So I want you to think about a baby. A baby starts out very tiny, is not able to do a lot of things on their own. They rely on their parents to do a lot of stuff for them. But they will eventually grow and mature into toddlers and kindergartners and elementary school children, all the way up to adults and even old people. Think too about your dog. If you have a dog, your dog started out as a puppy and then grows into a dog. So, living things must be able to grow. Living things must be able to change as well. I want you to think about the fact that a baby does not come out the same size with the same skills as it does when it grows up. All those things come about with change, with change. Think too about different things that you might see change. One example we're going to look at later is a caterpillar, and I want you to think about how a caterpillar may change. Okay, the next thing that tells us whether or not something is living or non living is its ability to reproduce or make more of its own kind. And we're going to talk about that later on in the lesson, but I want you to think about people and animals have babies, birds and other oviparous animals lay eggs, plants have seeds that they drop and will reproduce more plants. So, the things that you have to know about living things are they have to move on their own, they have to be able to take in nutrients, they grow and change, and they must be able to reproduce. So, let's take a look at these things right here. Okay, so if you look, these are things that are living. You have a mom horse and her baby. So that shows that the horse can reproduce or make more of its own. This little boy is eating an apple, so he is able to take in nutrients. He is feeding himself. These children are jumping up in the air. They are showing that they can move on their own. And then if you look at this caterpillar is not only growing, it is also changing. Through a process called metamorphosis, this caterpillar over its life cycle becomes a butterfly. So these are picture examples of living things. Now, I want you to look at these pictures on this side of non-living things, non-living things. So if you look at these pictures, you have a bowl of cereal. Is a bowl of cereal a living or non-living thing? If you guess non-living, you're correct. It cannot reproduce. It doesn't grow. It doesn't take in its own nutrients. It does not move. Okay, now the tricky thing is you could move cereal, you could stick a spoon in it and raise it up to your mouth, but that's not moving on its own. Now let's look at this right here. This is a clock. And the interesting thing about a clock is it has a face, it has hands, and this clock moves. Is it a living thing? No, of course not. A clock is an object that moves only because it has a battery or some type of mechanism in it to help the hands move and tell time. It does not need nutrients to survive. It cannot make more of itself, and it does not grow. This clock will always look like this its whole lifetime. What about a car? A car is also a non-living thing. While a car may need gas to drive around, that is not a nutrient that helps it survive. It does not reproduce and make more of its own. It does not grow or change. Now, it does move, but it requires a person to get in and actually operate the vehicle so that it will move. So, in order to be living, the object has to meet all of these things, not just a couple. Good job, boys and girls. Now, what I want you to do is you will need to get out your workbook on plants. It looks like this. You will need a pencil, scissors, glue, and crayons if you'd like. Pause the video while you get ready now. Welcome back, boys and girls. The first thing we're going to do, and is going to write your name on this writing line, and it says plants. Plants. That's a good word that we can blend the sounds into plants. If you want later, you can color this picture any way you want. But let's go ahead and get started. We're going to look at lesson 1 on living and non-living things. In your packet, you should have a strip of paper that looks like this. It's got objects on this paper. What we're going to do is we are going to decide whether or not these things are living. If they're living, we're going to cut and glue them on this side. If they are non-living, we are going to cut and glue them on this side. I want you to remember what you've learned so far about living and non-living things. So what I'm going to do to make it easier, and you may want to go ahead and do this now, pause the video if you need to, is I'm going to cut the objects apart so that they are ready to go and I'm ready to glue them on my paper. There we go. Okay, in doing this, I've ended up with the bottom one, and so I'm going to go ahead and start here. This is a rainbow, Do rainbows do the things that we talked about to make an object living or non-living? No, a rainbow is a non-living object. So what I want you to do is cut that rainbow and put it under non-living. Excellent work. Now, we talked about this one earlier. This is a clock. We remember that a clock is non-living. Even though its hands move, it is not an object that can move on its own. What about the bear, boys and girls? If you guessed that a bear was a living thing, you're correct. A bear can move, grow and change, feeds itself, and reproduces to make more of its own kind. Good job. What about a tree? Do you remember what we learned about with plants? A tree is a living thing. Believe it or not, boys and girls, a tree makes its own food to provide nutrients for itself. It does grow and change in the fact that it starts out as a seed and then grows into the beautiful tree. It can reproduce and make more. Good job. It also can move. It can lean towards light or away from light. What about this, boys and girls? Yep, it's a football, and it is also a non-living thing. What about a bicycle? You got it, non-living. Boys and girls, you are so smart. Okay, what about this? This is a child. Is a child a living or non-living thing? It's a living thing. Good job. Again, a child meets all of those requirements to be living. A child starts out as a baby and grows and changes into an adult. A child requires food to eat and water to drink. They can move on their own. Excellent. And then what about the butterfly? Remember, we learned earlier that a butterfly is a living thing. It actually starts out as a caterpillar and evolves into that beautiful butterfly. So good job, boys and girls, in sorting things that are living and non-living. Now, what I want you to do is look at the very bottom of your paper. And we've got two questions here. I want you to look at the box with the star in it. The question here says, do all living things grow? Yes or no? Boys and girls, that's right. All living things grow. So I'm going to go ahead and color in the circle with the smiley face showing that, yes, all living things grow. Now, let's look at the question with the flower. If something can move, does that mean it's living? No, boys and girls, remember, not only does the object move, it has to move all by itself. So we're going to go ahead and circle the bubble in. No, just because something can move does not make it a living object. Well, great job, boys and girls. We're going to go further into our lesson about plants in lesson 2. Join me then.